Welcome to the Virtual Excellence Show, where we speak to amazing people about virtual excellence, how to do things well in an increasingly virtual world. And today we have a special treat. We have Jamie Reed, who is currently the founder and executive director of Bright Birch Collective, a worldwide spanning collective of creative professionals working together to create amazing results, with an incredible background in creative work around the world. So, wonderful to have you on the show, Jamie.
Great to be here. Thanks, Ross.
So, you have been itinerant. You've lived around the world. So, I think what are the interesting aspects of that? So, you've worked in the Middle East, in Asia, Canada. Where else have you been?
That's pretty much it. I mean, I've traveled lots of places, but living mostly in Dubai. Was there for 7 years, 5 years in Singapore, and then back and forth between Canada. So
I suppose one of the aspects is you're always working for global agencies in those places, so you're part of global teams, and I presume you are pretty well used to working virtually at those times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting, with COVID and everything that happened, and the world sort of going into this tailspin. It didn't feel terribly different from the way I used to have to work, when I was in Dubai working with New York teams or people in South America, or when I was in Asia, in Singapore, having to work with people around that region. So pretty used to, Zoom calls and Google Hangouts and all of that. So it hasn't been terribly disruptive in terms of the way that I always tend to work anyway, and have been working for probably the last 15 years.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, there's plenty of people that have been doing this forever. It's not very different. I don't think, we get on airplanes less, but other than that, the sort of the ways of working are the same. But I mean, what are your reflections though on, I suppose your experience and what you've seen in this year and how people have responded to that? And those people who might not have been as used to these ways of working, or all the people you work with are more used to it.
No, I mean, it's funny. My parents are used to it because they've had to. That's how they got to know their grandkids and stuff, was through through the phone, through WhatsApp and whatnot. And now that I'm back in Canada, it's kind of, they find it strange to have to do it when I'm, a city away as opposed to countries away. And so it's interesting to see just how people are treating technology now as, they either see it as a barrier, they see it as something that can optimize their experiences. But no one just kind of treats it like a tool, like it is. And so you just kind of come across people with various sort of mindsets around how to use technology and how to leverage technology, and how, if you think about just how far everything's gone to become so much easier to use and interface, and the UX and UI of everything, it's all plug and play and drag and drop and all of those things. There's not a lot of barriers anymore to it. So I think anyone else who is kind of struggling with it is probably just a technophobe.
Some people would call you cruel, Jamie.
Maybe. I mean, but it's like, I don't know. It is a bit cruel, but I think you have to.
Well, no, I don't disagree. But the thing is that I absolutely agree with you. Technology is a tool, and people didn't get, like back from the 90s and earlier on, people just didn't get that and say, okay, well, how can we use it? How can we use it to make things better? And so that's always been my approach. And obviously you and the people we know. So now it's rather this thing of, how do we get those people who are into that mindset to that mentality and sort of get them across the threshold? Because yes, technology is easy to use. So now we just have to get more broadly those people to feel that way about it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in marketing, communications my whole career, and I've worked in healthcare and technology primarily. And so those industries are all about changing behaviors ultimately, right? Getting people to act differently than they are, to kind of have a positive impact on themselves. And I think this is no different. I mean, technology is like I was saying, I mean, it's not so much of a barrier anymore, except in people's own minds. And obviously there's, financial barriers. Certain places in the world don't have the infrastructure, and that's a totally different conversation. But in terms of the people that do, it's just a matter of trying and not being afraid to make mistakes. And I think the world generally is just getting into this idea of being more lean and how it operates. So not being fearful of everything being perfect all the time. I think if once you get over that and you realize that you can be iterative in your approach to pretty much anything, it's not just about business, being lean in business, it's about being lean in life and being able to kind of be flexible, go with the flow, like all of this stuff that I think you learn a lot more when you travel, when you have international experience, when you go through big disruptions. Like I started my career as a SARS screener, right? So it's my life started with a pandemic, and now I'm back with a pandemic. So you just kind of learn to roll with those punches. And I think that's generally an outlook that, we all need to start adopting.
Absolutely. And so just about every guest I've had on the show has essentially talked about what I frame as, learning by doing, which I think is, what you're describing. You learn, you try stuff, you learn along the way. But I think it's really interesting what you were saying about the technology in healthcare as behavioral change, in healthcare in particular. I mean, that's what healthcare should be, if it isn't already, is how do we change behaviors? And that's particularly relevant today, I think, as you say, and how do we use these tools? In a way, that's the theme of virtual excellence. How do we change our behavior so that we can not say, Zoom's not a fraction as good as a physical meeting. Well, let's treat it so that we can use the technology so that it could be better. In fact, Cisco, WebEx, who I've been working with, they've got this phrase around making virtual meetings 10x the quality of physical meetings, which is probably ambitious, but I mean, it's nice to be able to aim for that.
Sure. I mean, I miss a good handshake. I miss a good, taking your team out after a hard day's work to the pub and having a beer. Those sorts of things are, they're hard to replace. But I think in terms of exchanging ideas and being able to be more efficient, not having to fly around the world for an hour meeting, like there's definitely benefits to this sort of lifestyle. I'm getting a bit sick of my living room, but I think the world's changing, and I'm there's people that are afraid of the change, and then there's people that embrace it. And I'm definitely someone who embraces change, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the world ends up in the next 6, 12, 2 years, who knows? But it's exciting times.
So, we frame this around the power of perspective, which you're bringing to bear now, and I suppose that attitude to thinking about this. So this takes us to your current initiative, Bright Birch Collective. And so, perhaps you can describe it to start off, rather than be attempting to do so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think ultimately the Bright Birch Collective is, if you were a client, you would look at us and you would think that we're just a global network agency. If you are an independent consultant, you would see us as sort of a community. And really we're all of those things. I think the way that we describe it is we're all the benefits, all the best parts of being part of a global network agency. So, consultants have access to each other. It's quite lonely when you're a freelancer. And so this is an opportunity to kind of do more diverse things. When you work with other people, you get to, you can win awards and you can kind of do more complex works, more integrated work. And so you have all those benefits. You have benefits of things like having shared resources, having, I think access to just other perspectives, other mindsets. And then for clients, what they get is they get access to these senior people that typically in traditional agency models, the senior people would disappear after the pitch. And so what this does is they have access to these senior resources who are actually rolling up their sleeves and getting it done. But they don't have to deal with 10 different invoices. They don't have to manage a team of freelancers who don't necessarily know how to work together. And so what Brightbirch does is we kind of play this facilitator role where we'll curate the right team for the job. So you're not getting any fluff. You're not paying for people you don't need. You're not paying for the overhead that agencies will tack on to pay for their fancy offices and Christmas parties. But you are getting exactly what you need. And in fact, you're getting kind of sometimes we'll curate teams with quite surprising results where we'll bring in an expert from a different background, or we'll bring in a creative on a corporate kind of account, just to kind of spice it up and really allow that different perspective to the table. Which is, clients are finding it really refreshing, but they're also finding it is quite flexible, because at a moment's notice, if you don't need these people, then you kind of turn it off. And if all of a sudden you want to be in Cambodia, well, then you turn it on and now you're in Cambodia. And so there's also this kind of flexibility that comes with our model too. And it's sort of a roundabout way of explaining how we work, but essentially we're a virtual agency that uses freelance and independent talents. And we don't focus on just being a creative shop or being a PR agency or, these sorts of things. We don't want to define ourselves by that. We'd rather define ourselves by our ability to solve problems and to use whatever channel is the right channel, not necessarily whatever channel is sort of on our business cards. So.
Well, I've been writing about virtual professional services firms for over 20 years. And I have to say, it has not progressed as fast as I thought it would.
Yeah.
And I realize some of the reasons better now in terms of how hard it is to be able to do that. I think some of those challenges come from the ability to organize and connect and to work together. And some of it comes from client perspectives, which have obviously shifted substantially. And we have, of course, seen the rise of some pretty substantial, what are basically virtual professional firms in the last years. So I suppose this is really fascinating stuff. I think this is a big part of the future. This kind of bringing professionals, talented people together in more virtual structures rather than the traditional, go and work at an office 9 till 11 at night, or whatever it is, to and working with structured clients. There's so much more value creation from that. So let's try to dig in. So you've talked about some of the advantages, and I think there are also some challenges to it. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more the story of the birth of Brightbirch and some of the lessons along the way, which have, I suppose, helped shape what it is becoming now.
Yeah, I mean, glad to. There's like long story and the short story. I'll try to stick with the shorter version. So having worked in major agencies my whole life, advertising, PR, both in the Middle East, in Asia, and sort of really experiencing and understanding the hierarchies and the way that the organizations are kind of formed. To really, take advantage of the younger, more, the people who are more willing to kind of do all the grunt work. It's a tiring industry. I think, you're starting to see people burning out a lot more. It's just harder and harder. And I don't think a lot of people understand sometimes what happens behind the scenes. They're not interested in all of that. They just want to, they just want their campaign or their program. So, after leaving that world, and I decided to start, what I thought was Jamie's consulting business, which was just Brightbirch at the time. Took on some client work, and I'm not someone who typically says no to clients. I always say, sure, let's try to do that. So I was asked to help launch a baking product in Japan. And I was at the time traveling through Asia with my family. And I said, sure, well, I can do that. And I had to, find, I called up a contact who was a creative director. I ended up finding a freelancer who was a PR person. I ended up finding a couple, extra, writers and creative people to help pull together this sort of team that we were able to, answer the brief, did an amazing job. Client was super happy. We, this successful launch. But what happened was I wasn't necessarily surprised that we did a good job in terms of delivering the product. But what I was surprised with was the reaction from some of the consultants that afterwards came to me and said, Jamie, that was great. That was, I've been freelancing for maybe 10 years. I've been doing, paying the bills and doing a good job and loving what I do, but never having really that opportunity to kind of do the more complex, integrated work that I think a lot of us in big agencies, really love doing, the stuff that wins awards and the stuff that sort of has to consider various channels and various backgrounds and various sort of insights that when you're just sort of being tasked as a freelancer to one thing over and over again, you start to get this tunnel vision, I think. And so I realized that, based on that feedback, that maybe there is something to this idea of, it just happened to be the right time when big agencies were shedding really good people. But a lot of those people were going into freelancing because the gig economy was now kind of a thing. And I realized that maybe maybe the agency of the future looks like a diverse group of people from around the world. And so came back, turned Bright Birch into Bright Birch Collective, and sort of that's where it started. And now we have 120 people around the world, totally different backgrounds. There's still, pretty much everything you would expect within a marketing mix. But then we also have, change management consultants and technologists and things like that. So it's sort of, what can we bring to bear for clients? And when I worked at a PR agency, it used to bother me that clients would say, I have a problem. And then the answer was always, oh, well, we'll do PR. And then when you're working at an ad agency and the client has a problem, it's like, oh, we'll make an ad for you. Like that's going to solve everything. I was always of the mindset that, well, maybe we should hear about the whole problem first, and then we'll think about what's the best solution. And maybe it's a combination of things, or maybe it's something surprising that no one's really thinking about. And that was sort of, again, the way that I wanted to do work for clients. And now we're doing that because we're not this or that. We're kind of whatever we need to be able to solve our clients' problems. And I think that's the approach that is a bit different than other virtual agencies and things, because they tend to be more focused on a specific area. They're either healthcare focused, or they're, maybe they're a creative collective, but they're only really working in London. Like we from the very beginning, we started off truly global and truly broad in terms of what we can do. And I know that people say, well, you've got to specialize in something. And my answer to that was that, I don't want to. I'm a generalist. Typically, I'm interested in everything. So I didn't want to specialize. And the truth is that I don't think this day and age, especially with a model like this, that you need to. Because I use the example of in marketing, there was obviously the last 5-10 years was this really big push on programmatic and how do you target people and using digital channels and things like that. And then that seems to be sort of not working the way that everyone was expecting. And there's now this big shift to become more more into brand, and especially with COVID and stuff, right? It's like everyone's doubling down on their brand. And if I would have gone into business when I did, I would have picked probably a programmatic agency, and now I'd be out of a job. But I can totally I can just totally now we're a branding agency if we need to be a branding agency. And so I think it's the resiliency that comes from having a model like this actually woke me up to the fact that, it's not just freelancers that are going to be working like this. It's everybody is going to be working like this eventually. And in whether you're in a big corporation or whether you're working for yourself, this is the future of work.
So some really interesting things in what you were just saying there. And I think that's that you should definitely capture that as the little Genesis story, because I think that's really strong. But so a couple of points. One, I think the really interesting point is that you can do things at scale together that you couldn't do individually, and that's obviously one reason to get a group of people together. And it's not just you don't need to turn things down, because you can actually participate in something with colleagues and bigger things. You can enjoy the things of doing things at scale and impact, which you couldn't do alone. But what underpins this, and I think, as you say, that sort of light bulb moment for you, is this community piece. And that's the magic, I think, which, if you're able to tap that, could really make this, absolutely wonderful venture. So specifically on community, how are you building community? What have been the challenges? What are the ways in which this global, distributed, disparate group, what's that journey to community that you're on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think community is probably, it's probably the hardest part of this whole thing. I think, coming up with ideas and being able to get people to work together, I think, that's hard too, but the community building and keeping people engaged within a community, I'm finding that to be the hardest part. And not maybe because, I'm not good at it, or it's, at the fact that we're global. I think people are interested. And if you look at the people that we have within the Bright Birch Collective, we're very diverse. We're not just diverse in terms of where we're from. We're diverse in terms of, gender. We're diverse in terms of just the way we think, different social economics, things like diversity is our strength ultimately. And that does make it hard because people tend to want to connect with people that they have something in common with. And so when you're starting from a base where everyone's so different, the only thing you have in common is this sort of desire to know and introduce yourself to different people, which isn't necessarily a natural thing. And so that's been sort of part of the problem. The other problem too is that we're living in a moment right now where people have a lot going on, and you can't really know the challenges that people are facing. And so, trying to get people to commit to a global group where there isn't, right now we're not so flush with work that it's like everyone's got tons and tons of opportunity. So you kind of have to really believe and understand the model and really want to be part of it to kind of really get the benefit out of it. But there's a lot of people have a lot going on right now. And like, for example, we have a couple members who are from Lebanon, and there was the explosion not too long ago. I was in the middle of a pitch and with someone on that team, and you can't really, it's like your life, you've got other things to deal with right now, right? And so from a community perspective, you really have to just be patient. You have to be aware of the fact that the world is very different in different places, and different things are going on, and that individuals have, their own motivations for things. And so if you can find a common ground and just be patient and just keep nurturing sort of the value of what we're trying to do, for example, like just try to create a community and allow people the opportunity to share ideas and share resources, then it will just form over time. And you just have to, some people will be interested in it, some people will be all in, and some people will just kind of fly in and fly out. And you just have to be willing to accept that, humans are messy animals, and you're never going to corral everyone. And I often think I need like a Steve Ballmer kind of character to just be up on stage and just keeping everyone motivated. But then I'm not like that. I'm not into that kind of thing. So I think if we just kind of stick to what we're good at and what we know, and the right kinds of people will gravitate towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, one of the reasons why the Steve Ballmer thing doesn't work is that they're not employees. They've got lots of other things on, and so that's part of that, whether they engage. So it is very challenging. People have got more fragmented attention than ever before.
Yeah.
So to get people engaged in something is a journey, and it has to grow. The network effects comply, people to sort of come in and out of it. And as you've already described, it is very much self-selecting, as in some people are engaged, some people are ready to be engaged, and others, they won't, or it's just all opportunistic or transactional. And so but that's valid, that's fine. This is just the nature of it. But this comes to the next point around team. So since community is just this, is I suppose, a more amorphous. We are connected, we are together in it, and to varying degrees of engagement, we are communicating. But then when you've got a client project, you're a team then. you have an objective, you've got a timeline, you've got to work together. So then how do you transition from that community to the team? And then how do you make that team work when, again, these probably people have never met before? They're probably in very different locations, different backgrounds. How do you make that team then work well?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it doesn't always work well. And I think that's just an honest answer that, you have to work hard at it, and you have to see how people fit, not just in terms of their skill sets, in terms of their personalities, in terms of their mindsets, in terms of their time zones sometimes, right? I think there's a lot of variables that you have to consider in terms of pulling together the right teams. And I forget who was saying it to me, but if you took all of the best people possible and at what they do and you put them together, they're not necessarily going to be a good team. And they're not going to be a high, a team that's going to be able to deliver at a high quality, because they're all alpha. They're all trying to probably compete with each other in some way, or so finding the complementary pieces and building out teams that are, where everyone understands their roles, but everyone is respected for their expertise in their areas, so that people aren't competing, but there's enough overlap where there's interest in what each other's doing. Because if clients wanted to hire freelancers to do one job, they'll go to Fiverr, and that's fine. And that's not the kind of work that we want to do. If they want to hire two freelancers to kind of, who put them together to kind of do something, they can probably manage that. But if they need to do something that's more complex, that requires 5 to 10 people, the only option they have currently is agencies, right? Or consultancies, or, groups that are designed to form teams. And those people all buy into some kind of, for TBWA, it was like this disruption methodology, and like all of the different agencies have like their kind of methodologies and their ways of doing things. And you have to really drink the Kool-Aid. And, I think we kind of have that too. And the buy-in for us is like, look, you can be we want the best people, but you have to, if you're going to be part of Brightbirch, you have to buy into the fact that you're going to work with other people. And I don't care if you, are of a certain background and your whole life you've been taught to dislike people of a different background. If you're on the same team with those people, like, we are an open, respectful organization, and that everyone comes from somewhere, and that we bring the best of ourselves to the team, but that we agree that we're going to work together and that we're going to be collaborative, and that at the end of the day, we're building this around the client's need, not around each other, not around, it's about how do we bring the best for the client. And that comes actually back from my old days working in the hospital, like from when I was a SAR screener, as I was telling you before. I think, when I learned about how interdisciplinary team models are built around patients, and as a best practice, like why this is considered so revolutionary. But at the time it kind of was, where it's like, what does the patient need? And how do we put people around them, as opposed to, what the doctor says and then what the nurse says, and everyone's kind of got their own little fiefdom. Instead, let's build a team around, including the family, including, maybe if they're really religious or something, it's like maybe they're a priest or imam or whatever it is. And when I kind of saw that, I was like, that makes so much sense. Like if I was like healing or rehabbing, I would want everyone to kind of know everyone else around me, trying to help me, because they're, and I would feel like the lines of communication would be all there. No one would be missing information. Everyone would kind of know their roles, and I would, as the patient, would feel more relaxed, and I would heal better, right? And so if you take that model and you put, instead of a patient, you have a client, and you have a problem, and you just build the team around the need, not necessarily who's available at that moment, or who belongs to which department, then you're truly solving the problem. You're not just paying it lip service. And I think once people buy into that, then they're willing to work as a team for it, because it's a goal that we all share. And I think shared goals and shared values is really what it's about to form a good team.
Yes.
There is obviously the practical side of things, right? Like technology plays a huge role in terms of how do you manage all these people. And like, if I didn't have Slack to communicate, or if I didn't have, Trello to organize all of our timelines and things like that, then that makes it a lot harder. And ultimately, you need one person who's seen as the leader, and so we call that person the client architect. And their job is to know the client and to know the client in and out, and to kind of almost be the proxy for the client. But then they also understand all of the things that Bright Birch Collective can bring to bear for them. So maybe we're hired to do one thing, but as they're getting to know the business, it's like, well, we can help you with that too. And so they're building the team out, but that team communicates and they know each other. And so you're not going to find another agency, and you're not going, you're keeping everything within the same team, and you have that client architect who just understands your needs much more. And it becomes I think a different kind of relationship that you have. Again, because you're also working with people that are more experienced and who are working for themselves. So they have more on the line. They're going to do a good job because they have to pay their bills and they have to feed their kids. So it's different than when you kind of hire people within an agency, and maybe clients don't really know this, but like there's a lot of dead weight in agencies. And, you don't have that when you have freelancers in a lot of ways, even though it's still a dirty word in some places in the world. Freelancers, they have to do a good job. If they don't, it's on them. So in a lot of ways, it takes a lot of the risk away from our model too.
I really love the medical metaphor there. Bringing everyone together, and that's the objective. One focus. And a lot of what you were just saying there, it actually harks back to my book, Developing Knowledge-Based Client Relationships. How do you understand the client and bring the full capabilities of the firm to be able to bring to bear in a way that creates value for the client. And in a way, what you're describing there is this this role of this virtual, call it a virtual team manager, and there's a particular set of skills, and they are not very common. The people that have that ability to understand and engage with that. So that goes, and perhaps to round out now, is looking at the future of work. So all of this speaks to, the perspectives on which we can have on these new organizational forms, on community and the role of the work of the future, particularly as we become more virtual, being able to build these teams together, again, often virtually. So what does that tell us about the future of work? I mean, is this the model of the future, or what can we be thinking about in where this is going?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. And it's probably important to know that like Bright Birch started a year before COVID happened, right? And it was only really when COVID happened and clients were all of a sudden realizing that, oh, hey, maybe it doesn't matter that you work from anywhere, and maybe it doesn't matter that people are, of various backgrounds, and maybe it doesn't matter if they're freelancers and not employees that are doing the job, as long as they're experienced and they're the right people. And so COVID sort of definitely, probably, in some ways, for good and for bad, accelerated this phenomenon. And it's not all the way there yet, but I don't think that, with vaccines and everything coming down the line, I still don't think that people want to go back to work the same way they did. Maybe they want to still go to the office. Like I said, having that pint after work with a couple colleagues, like I think people are going to want to go back to some of that. But do you want to be like locked to your desk 9 to 5 necessarily? I don't think so. And so, but it's not just really about that. I think I kind of had a realization not too long ago that, and I know this is the Virtual Excellence Show, but Bright Birch is pretty low tech. We don't have like a big data infrastructure and platforms and things like that. It's not how we're built. We're built to just, bring the right people around the table and then work together. So we definitely use digital platforms. But one thing I did realize was that, if this is the way that the world's going to work, then we need to kind of start codifying, what makes good teams, what makes the appropriate, what are the ingredients that need to be put together to kind of solve different types of problems. So first we need to codify what are the problems, like what are the different permutations and types of problems that are out there. And then we need to codify, well, what are the talents and personalities and variables that humans need to kind of have to be able to know how to work together. And then how do you then match those people in the right ways to a team that can then solve that problem. And so that's sort of what we're working on now. And then I started thinking, well, this is how everyone's going to work. And so if you look at, fragmentation and decentralization and consolidation as like really big themes that are kind of just happening all over the place. The hierarchies that traditionally, those people that they get into a role and then they just kind of sit there, those people don't have, they're not hiding behind their door anymore in their office to kind of, they're exposed. And if you're not going to be able to solve the task at hand, then you're going to be found out pretty fast. And I think the next generation that's coming into the workforce are going to be designed in such a way to start looking and being enabled to go after problems. And so the silos within organizations, it's not like, oh, that's that department's problem. Oh, that's that department's problem. It's no, we're going to, it's the same as in the hospital, right? They're going to be putting who's the best person to work on this project. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, but if they're in this organization, even if they're not, right? Even there's going to be like these hybrid models where it's like some people work for the company on the team, some people don't. They might work for Brightbirch, they might be brought in. Some people are going to be robots, and some people are going to be, AI that are going to be all part of the same team, and everyone's going to have their role, and they're going to come from different departments, but they're not. It's not going to be a siloed approach anymore. It's not going to be hierarchical. It's really going to be built around the problems and who are the best people to solve those problems. It's just kind of logical, and digital platforms, enable it, and the COVID-19, pandemic and everything that's going on right now, and the transition, that's enabling it, and it's accelerating. And we'll see how, there's definitely still a lot of questions about like how physical office space is going to work in the future and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily have the answer to those things, but I definitely know that the approach, the siloed approach that organizations typically had is not going to last much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not about technology at all. It's about how do you organize, how do you connect people, how do you get that engagement. And so, I certainly believe in, as I've said, I've long believed in the virtual professional, models. And I think, what you're doing with Brightbirch is very promising. I think a lot of aspects of that, and, just in sort of positioning and opportunity. But as you've, very honestly shared, there's challenges. Of course, it's difficult, it's hard in many ways. But on the, through those challenges, there's an immense value creation. So for those who are not aware, I'm a member of Brightbirch Collective, and love to participate more and be part of this model and learn by participating in it. I think there's some great opportunities for it. So congratulations on where you've got to so far, and very much look forward to seeing and being part of that journey of the perspective you bring to a community team and creating the future of work with Brightbirch Collective. Thank you, Jamie.
Well, thanks for your support, and thanks for being part of our group.
So that was Jamie Reid giving us perspective on community teams and the future of work. So if you like the show, please like it, put in any comments or questions you have below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube to hear more about people and other insights on virtual excellence and creating a better future. Thanks for being part of the show. Have a wonderful day.